Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Main Transit Fire Hall. I'm Assemblyman Sean Ryan. I would like to thank Captain Jim Lewitta and the Main Transit Fire Department for allowing us to use this truly wonderful facility. I'm joined today by a lot of my colleagues in governments and special guests. It's my honor to introduce my fellow colleagues from the State Assembly, Jane Corwin, Ray Walter, John Soretto, and Joe Giglio. We also have some mayors with us today, Mayor Byron Brown from the City of Buffalo and Mayor Paul Deister from the City of Niagara Falls. Thanks for all of you for coming today. We have a wonderful co-chairmen from the Regional Economic Development Council, Howard Zemsky and Dr. Satish Tripathi. Many others are joining us today, and we thank them all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here in Amherst with all of you, and especially with our governor, Governor Cuomo. As many of you know, it wasn't long ago that our state government was a symbol for government dysfunction. You could hear the jokes on the late-night TV shows. Albany was rife with gridlock, and even getting an on-time budget seemed like an impossible task. I think it's safe to say that those days are over. We have lowered taxes, we've created more jobs, and turned a deficit into a surplus. We have a leaner, more efficient government. A government that, for the first time in a long time, promised fiscal responsibility and actually delivered on that promise. A government that is making smart investments now to guarantee a brighter future. As we all know, there's no better investment than the investment in education, and this year's budget recognizes that by creating a statewide pre-kindergarten program so that every child can be learning early as possible. The state budget takes immediate action to delay the Common Core implementation that will reduce stress and anxiety for students, parents, and educators, and eliminate unnecessary testing and protect student privacy. No governor in recent memory has spent more time and effort in Western New York, and the results, they're apparent. They're all around us. Just think of what's happened to our region in just the last 3 years. The Buffalo Bills have a new long-term lease. Renovations are underway at Ralph Wilson Stadium. They're currently going on. If you went out there today, you'd see 600 construction workers on the job. We'll soon have a state-of-the-art genome center. New companies are opening up headquarters in Buffalo. We've heard it before, but it's true. The Cranes are back in Buffalo. Just recently, we broke ground at the UB Medical School, a feat that just 4 years ago, it seemed impossible that we would ever actually start that project. These are the big items. The governor has also made small changes that have been meaningful. By streamlining the regulatory process, New York State's craft brewery and distillery business is booming, and new establishments are popping up all over New York State, creating good jobs, especially here in Western New York. No matter what the issue is, that's the type of leadership we have come to expect from our governor. I am pleased to announce my partner from the State Senate, Senator George Maziarz.
Thank you, Sean.
Welcome, George. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sean. And thank you, Governor Cuomo, for coming to Western New York again. And I particularly want to thank whoever the person was that chose such a tall podium today. Thank you again, Sean, and of course it's always an honor, along with my colleagues in both the Assembly and the Senate, and former Congressman John LaFalce, to welcome all of you here and Governor Cuomo here. This budget continues the immense progress that we have made over the last 3 years. It's a responsible spending plan that invests in education, as Sean pointed out, and regional economic development while protecting homeowners and attracting businesses to Western New York. Two of the major projects that I think are transformational for here in Western New York are the Riverbend project at the old Republic Steel site in Buffalo and the Stamp project in Genesee and Orleans County. This legislature and this governor knew that New York had no future as the tax capital of the nation. And we all put a stop to skyrocketing property taxes that were driving families and businesses from this state. By working together, the legislature and the governor have lowered taxes for every person in this state. held spending to 2% for 4 years in a row, and transformed New York State government into a leaner, meaner, functioning body. Western New York hasn't seen this much activity in a very long time, and people are feeding off that momentum. They are excited about what's happening in our community. They see cranes in the air, and they want to participate. This fourth on-time budget. I want to say that again because it really feels good if you're a member of the legislature. This fourth on-time budget is just the latest example of New York's transformation. It's bold and it's ambitious, and it's exactly what this state needs to continue down the path to prosperity. When you are putting together a $144 billion spending plan and you have 212 legislators, you are not going to get a budget that everyone agrees on every particular aspect of it. But under this legislature and this governor's leadership, we are moving forward together. And I'm proud to work with my colleagues in the legislature, both those that are here today and those that were unable to be here today, with the governor to improve the lives of New Yorkers, and particularly those in Western New York and all across the state. I am now pleased to introduce one of those Western New Yorkers, Jenny Vitko. Jenny. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Senator Maziar. Good morning. My name is Jenny Vitko, and I have been an Erie County resident for over 30 years. It is my pleasure to be here with our local officials and Governor Cuomo. I thank him for inviting me and speak to you today. The biggest reason I am here is to thank the governor and the legislature for reaching an agreement that will significantly lower our property taxes. My husband Ken and I have 5 children, 14-year-old twins, a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old. In addition to everything else, that's 5 college funds we are saving for. The future depends on us, and our future depends on our yearly tax bill. Right now, we approximately pay $4,300 in property taxes. That means roughly 6% of our income goes just to paying property taxes. That's on top of what we pay on various local governments and administrative districts that we have spread it up around our community. This plan is great news for the families like mine who will put the extra savings towards our kids' college funds or making sure that they can go to summer camps. Hundreds of dollars in savings is real money. That can make all the difference when it comes to the day-to-day expenses of raising a family in Western New York. It will make a real difference for working and middle-class families just like mine, not just in Western New York, but all across New York. I am here today not because of politics. The property tax burden faces this state is not a political issue. I'm here because the future of my family has benefited from this plan, and so will the future of so many other families who have been struggling with their property taxes. Today is a proud day for New Yorkers, and it is an honor to speak to you today. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Governor of the State of New York, Andrew Cuomo.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And first to Jenny, thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you for getting up here and sharing your story. Let's give her a round of applause. It's my pleasure to be back in Western New York where all good things are happening. We have an all-star cast turnout today because we have good news. I notice when I have bad news, fewer people turn out, but when we have good news, the all-star cast is out, and it is out today. First to our regional economic development heads, who we owe a big debt of gratitude. We talk about the economy coming back. These two men, I call them the dynamic duo. They have really been doing yeoman's work with great results. Howard Zemsky, Dr. Satish Tripathi, stand up. Let us give you a round of applause. We have Mayor Byron Brown, who's with us today. Pleasure to be with you, Mayor Byron Brown. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. And Assemblyman Sean Ryan and Senator George Maziarz, who are both personal friends, who are really extraordinary representatives. But they're joined by their colleagues today. And I want to say this at the very beginning. This is a big deal for us, grand slam, big deal for New York, 4 budgets in a row. And people say to me all the time, why now? What's the difference? How do you pass all these budgets on time? It was such a problem for such a long time. And the truth is, the legislature really does deserve the credit, because what was happening in the old days is you had tremendous politics, and it was gridlock. What you have going on in Washington, you had going on in Albany for many, many years. And people were putting their politics first, and they were giving their political speeches, and they were making their political arguments, and they were holding on to their political point, and they wouldn't compromise. And what happens when you have gridlock? Everybody loses because you have paralysis. And that's what you had for many, many years. And it sounds easy to say, put your politics aside. But this group of representatives actually did it. And it's what public service is all about. And it was my pleasure to witness it. But they said, we're Democrats, we're Republicans, that's all baloney. We're New Yorkers first, and let's act like New Yorkers, and let's put our differences aside and find compromise, and let's move this state forward. And that's what they did. And I'd ask the Assembly people and the senators to please stand, and let's give them a round of applause. Now, the state budget is important. You know, the word budget, it sounds like it's just a plan. Well, it's easy to do a budget. You sit down, you make up a number of numbers, and you have a budget. But this budget is, it's actually difficult because it winds up being everything. As Senator Maziar said, you have 212 people in the legislature, a $144 billion budget. And what the budget really winds up asking is, who are we going to tax? How much are we going to tax them? And then what are we going to do with the money? So that's sort of everything when you put those two questions together. And then you have to get 212 people to agree on how to spend $144 billion. And that's really, really hard. Luckily, we have a delightful group. But it's still really, really hard, even with a delightful group. And that's why it's a big deal. We call it a grand slam. And as you heard from Assemblyman Sean Ryan, to put it in focus, you have to remember where we started. You know, just 4 years ago, the state was in really, really tough shape. It was literally a joke on late-night TV. They weren't passing bills. There were scandals. The Senate had a coup. I never even heard of a coup in the state Senate, but we had a coup in the state Senate. There were lawsuits. It was really a terrible, terrible situation, and the government wasn't working at all. Even worse, there was a sense that New York was losing it, that the Empire State was no longer the Empire State, that things were slipping, that the best was behind us, and the future wasn't as bright as the past, especially in upstate New York. And it had been going on for a long time, and people were feeling that it just wasn't the same, and it wasn't going to be the same. And that's very dangerous, because once you have that negative energy, it becomes self-fulfilling. There's a positive synergy, there's a negative synergy, and that's where we were. And the truth is we did have problems, and the problems were from our own making. We had very high taxes, we had an anti-business mentality. Upstate New York did not get the attention that it deserved by the state government, and that's true too. There's a famous saying, New York State has no future as the tax capital of the nation. You know who said that? Me. I figure if I keep saying it, one day it will be a famous saying. But that's true. You become the highest tax state in the nation. Don't be surprised when people and businesses move. Why? Because they're mobile. They're more mobile than ever before. And I know we're New Yorkers and we believe this is the only state, the state of New York. But if you look at a map, they have these other states that are out there. You see these lines. And yes, maybe this is the best state, but if you raise taxes too high, people will eventually leave. And they were leaving. And we learned that lesson, and we learned that lesson the hard way. Why were taxes so high? Because we spent a lot of money. That's why taxes are high. You had to raise the money that you wanted to spend. It was to the point where we had a spending addiction. This chart tells you how we got to where we were. This is 50 years of the state of New York spending. New York State spent more money than the people in the state earned. I mean, just think about that for a moment. That violates like the basic rule of economics. I have 3 teenage daughters, so I know about the basic rules of economics. I'm trying to work them through the basic rules of economics. We have some young people here. Here's the basic rule of economics. It's for one of my daughters especially. You cannot spend more money than you make. You can't do that. It is a system. And the system has to be in balance. The inflow must meet the outflow. So what you spend, what you make, you can spend. New York State was violating that basic rule, actually spending more money than the people in the state were earning. Inflation was going up 4.1%. We were spending 6.8%. And we did it for 50 years. Well, politics didn't even matter. Over those 50 years, you had every kind of political configuration you can imagine. You had Democratic governors, you had Republican governors, you had short governors, you had tall governors. You had a Republican Senate, you had a Democratic Senate. It was beyond politics. It was that the special interests were controlling the budget process because it was about the money. And it was a lot of money. So job one was get spending under control, break the 50-year cycle and the 50-year pattern. And that wasn't easy, but that was job one. We started by reducing the size of government. We brought down the size of government to the lowest level in 50 years, period. 118,000 employees in the state government. Then we renegotiated the labor contracts because we were looking at a $10 billion deficit. And we went to the unions and we said, look, we just can't afford to pay the raises. And we negotiated a contract that had no raises for 3 years. The unions did their part, and they increased their contribution in health care. Then we reformed the pension system because a big cost driver is the state pension system. And we can't afford it anymore, and we revised the pension system. And when you put all of that together and tightening our belt and showing fiscal discipline, we reduced the level of spending to the lowest level in over 50 years. Actually, the lowest level of spending that they can actually find in the history books. Governor Rockefeller, Lieutenant Governor Wilson spent an average of 11%. Great Republican governor, Governor Rockefeller, big builder, built the SUNY system, the World Trade Centers, the Empire Plaza, but spent a lot of money. One of the reasons New York had a high income tax originally was paying off the debt from the Rockefeller years. Cuomo, related to me, different first name, husband of my mother, 12-year governor, spent 6.9% on average over his 12 years. Governor George Pataki, Republican, 5.2%. We have spent 1.2% over 4 years. We brought the spending down that dramatically. And because we spent less, we can tax less. And today, every New Yorker in this state pays a lower income tax rate than they did 3 years ago, period, on every income level all across the spectrum. For the middle class, up to $300,000, which is more than middle, it's upper middle, upper middle, they are paying the lowest income tax rate since 1953. We just brought down in this budget the business tax, the corporate tax, because we want businesses staying, we want businesses coming. We brought it down to 6.5, lowest level since 1958. Manufacturers tax we brought to 0 because we want manufacturers staying, we want them coming, lowest level since 1917. And then we have a tax in this state called the estate tax. We call it the death tax. People leave the state to die because they don't want to pay our estate tax. That's how high it is. And we raised the threshold to $5.4 million to keep that income in this state. Now we want to attack the worst tax in the state. And you know what the worst tax is? It's the property tax. There's actually more money paid in property tax than in the income tax. And the property tax has nothing to do with the state. FDR used to rail about the property tax and was even more annoyed that he was blamed for the property tax. Property tax is all local government, and it is bigger than the income tax, and it's what's causing us the problem. And it's not only high, when you hear Jenny say $4,000, you say that's high. It's worse than that. We have the highest property taxes in the country. In the country. Westchester County, highest property tax in the United States of America. Nassau, second highest property tax in the country. I'll tell you what's even worse. Upstate New York, 13 of the 15 highest taxed counties by percentage of home value, upstate New York. 13 out of 15. That's why when people are saying, I'm leaving, I can't afford to be here, I can't buy a house, I can't pay the mortgage and the tax, this is exactly what they're talking about. And they are right. Why do we have such a high property tax? Because we have too many governments. We have over 10,500 local governments. Just think about that. Every morning you wake up, 10,500 light switches, 10,500 bureaucracies all across the state. Erie County, 1,000 local governments, $1.6 billion just in infrastructure, just to pay the overhead, $1.6 billion. And when you look at what they actually are, it raises questions. 1 county, 3 cities, 25 towns, villages, school districts, fire districts, drainage districts, fire protection, lighting districts, refuse, sewage, water, 939 special districts for over 1,000 governments in total. 43,000 employees in Erie County, 1 employee for every 21 county residents. That's what's driving the property taxes, over 10,000 vehicles. Now, we thought the problem was that it was hard to merge these local governments from a legal point of view. When I was Attorney General, I spent a lot of time passing a law that made it easier for local governments to merge with each other. Okay? Question is, we passed that law 7 years later. How many local governments actually merged or consolidated? What do we say? Who has a guess? D. 2 out of 10,500. Why? Because it's too easy in government just to raise taxes. See, in the private sector, company has economic pressures. You have to have a bottom line, you have to be solvent, you have to show a profit, or you go hungry. If you can't pay your bills, there's a little concept called bankruptcy. Household, same thing. You have to live within your paycheck, or the phone rings, it's a debt collector, you have a problem. Government, the costs go up, you have a very easy answer. Just raise the taxes. Just raise the taxes. And we did. And we did that year after year after year, and now we have the highest taxes in the nation, and it's actually hurting the state, and we have to change it. And that's what this proposal is all about. And it's about using democracy and giving people information and empowering people to make a difference. This is how the plan works. Year 1, every homeowner in the state gets a check from the state of New York for 2% of their property tax bill. Whatever your property tax bill is, you're going to get a check from the state for 2%. One condition: if your local government stays under what's called the property tax cap. We passed that property tax cap of 2%. So if your local government stays under the 2%, you get a check from the state. Year 2, same thing. You get a check from the state. If your local government stays under 2%, with one caveat, we want the local governments to give us a plan that shows how they save 1%, just 1%, a year for 3 years, by coming up with cooperative strategies to share services and find economies of scale. Now, the local government says, our local governments are annoyed with me. They say that I am creating pressure on them to reduce cost. You know what? I'm creating pressure on them to reduce costs. I plead guilty. It's true. But that is exactly what we have to do. And the best best way to do this is through democracy, which is you understanding the stakes and you getting in the game and you being more engaged with your local government. If the local governments fail to do it, then the homeowners in those areas wouldn't get a credit. And that's the best reason why they're actually going to do it. And all we're asking to do is, Erie County has 1,000 governments. They probably have never even been in the same room together. And we want all 1,000 governments come together, have a meeting, the county executive calls the meeting and says, we have to figure out how to cooperate. And we have to find savings. And we have to figure out how to share services. And does everybody really have to do everything? And let's break down these silos. And does everybody have to do snow plowing? And does everyone have to do purchasing? And does everyone have to do human resources? And what functions can we share to bring down the cost? And all I'm asking them to do is save 1 point a year for 3 years, which is totally doable. But once we start to get them working together, then you're going to see the kind of efficiencies that we can find. And if we do something about property taxes, this state is a different state. To continue economic development, we talked about the regional economic development councils. They're doing great. Yours is doing better than great. This budget continues them for another year with another round of funding and another $150 million. Look how beautiful they are and smiley when they get money. Look, isn't it funny? Look at Zemsky's smile. I've never seen him smile like that unless he's getting a check. Buffalo $1 billion, which we talked about, which we pledged at the very beginning of my administration. I said to Buffalo and Western New York, you've been down for a long time. You have big problems. We can solve them. We're going to solve them together. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I pledged $1 billion. We've been executing that plan. It's gone phenomenally well. We put the $1 billion in the budget, so something happens to me, I drop dead of a heart attack, the money is in the budget, you don't have to worry. I'm sure you'll miss me, but it's in the budget. We have our Startup New York project that I'm very excited about that takes everything that people thought about the old New York and turned it on its head. You know how they say old New York, high taxes? Startup zones are 64 zones across the state, geographic zones. In those zones, no taxes for 10 years for any new business. Makes the state of New York the least expensive place in the country to locate your business. No income tax, no property tax, no sales tax for 10 years. Nobody has to talk about any other state. You have to move to this state, start your business in New York because it's the least expensive place to site your business. The budget focuses on education with an over 5% increase in aid to education. And remember, this state already spends more money per pupil than any state in the country to educate our children. And we're proud of that. It's an investment, but we're putting an additional 5% into education, which is $90 million in Western New York. The best investment in education is pre-K. Every educational expert will say the sooner you get those young minds into schools, the better. We have kindergarten, full kindergarten all across the state. The next step is going to be full-day pre-K all across the state, and we want to be the state that gets there first. Common Core implementation, you heard from Assemblyman Ryan. Common Core is the right direction to go, but we rushed it, and the teachers weren't ready, and the students weren't ready, and it created a lot of anxiety for students who had to take tests, and they felt like they were going to get a bad grade and it was going to hurt them. We passed a law that says the students will take the test, but it will be for practice only, and the grades won't go on their transcript, so there won't be any negative. We support charter schools. We support them all across the state. This budget does that. This budget invests in technology for public schools. There's going to be a bond issue on the ballot, $2 billion for technology for public schools, because we want to make sure we have the best tools in public education. That would be $180 million in Western New York. Our health care system is one of the best in the country, and we want to keep it that way. We invest more in capital repairs for hospitals and clinics as we're changing our healthcare system into a community-based healthcare system. We also attack the problem called out-of-network costs. I've been working on this since I was Attorney General. This is when you go to a doctor who is outside your network of your health plan, and you get a bill that's 4 times what your health company will reimburse. This stops that in the state of New York. We invested in the environment with another $9 million. We are investing very heavily in emergency management. I've been governor for 3.5 years about. There have been 9 federally declared disasters in my 3.5 years. 9 federally declared disasters. My father was governor for 12 years. He had less than a handful. There is something going on. There is a pattern of extreme weather. We're having hurricanes. We're having floods. We're having a 100-year flood twice a year now. I want to be ready for it. I want to be prepared for it. I want our emergency management personnel to be prepared for it. I want these ladies and gentlemen to be prepared for it with the right training and the right equipment, because it literally is a matter of life and death. And I want to make sure we're doing everything we can, and this state will. More affordable housing. We have a scholarship program for high school students that I am so excited about. If you graduate in the top 10% of your high school and you pursue STEM courses, you will get a full scholarship to a SUNY school, period. One other point I almost skipped, but there are a number of young people in the audience. Cracking down on texting while driving. Texting while driving is a crisis in this state now. It is especially a crisis for young drivers because it's a bad combination. They get their license, they believe they're masters of the road, they understand it, they get it. You can't tell them anything. It's all from personal experience. I just trained 3 of them. They know better, they know better, they know better, and then they're the generation that is biologically attached to their device in their hand. The umbilical cord continued to grow, came out the hand, and attached to the device. It's a fascinating phenomenon. And they can't put down the BlackBerry or the iPhone, and when it makes a tingle, they have to pick it up. You put those 2 things together, that is a bad combination. Inexperienced drivers and texting. And we just raised the penalties for young drivers because we'll literally save their lives. And if they get caught texting while they're driving during the first probationary period, they're going to lose their license for a period of time. I'd rather they lose their license than they lose their lives. And that's what this is about, and I'm proud of that law. Most of all, 4 years later, New York State government is finally working. The budget process was about gridlock. 30 years of experience. Out of the past 30 years, 23 years the budget was late, an average of 50 days late, believe it or not. We've gotten 4 budgets done in a row. That's why we call it a grand slam. Last time you had 4 budgets done in a row. Nelson Rockefeller was the governor. Perry Duryea was the Speaker, and Senator Bridges was the head of the Senate. And that was a long time ago. And most importantly, the formula is working. And what the budgets are doing is working. You bring down spending, you bring down taxes, you bring up jobs, and you bring up revenue. And that is what is going on in the state right now. And the proof is in the pudding. And the numbers are inarguable. We created 400,000 new jobs. We have more private sector jobs in the state today than any other time in history, period. 7.5 million private sector jobs. We're number 2 in this state in creating new jobs since the recession. Our exports are up 15%. The rating agencies have all given us positive reviews. The budget that came out last week was given positive reviews. and unemployment in every region of the state is down. Not just New York City, not just downstate, upstate New York. And upstate New York, listen to this, has had the largest single-year drop in unemployment in history. Unemployment came down 2 full points last year from 8.4 to 6.4 because upstate New York is on the way back. You feel it here in Buffalo and Western New York. That's what the cranes are all about. And my friends, the best is yet to be. We have just started to see the renaissance that Western New York is going to go through. We did the hard work, and we turned the arrows around. And we got spending under control, and we got taxes under control. We're changing the reputation, and we're saying you don't have to leave. This is the place to be. And once you reduce those liabilities and you take away the negative, this state has everything imaginable. And it is the greatest state in the country. We just had to let it shine. And it's going to shine brighter than ever before. Thank you, and God bless you.